In this video, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know to be able to implement drag and drop into your React applications. We're going to do this in a way that is super simple in terms of the code that you're going to have to write, but also in a way that looks really good for the users of your application. Now, for this, we're going to be using the dnd-kit library, which is a modern, lightweight, and very performant library that is going to give us all of the pieces required to implement drag and drop into our React application. Now, before we get to that, I just want to mention that if you like the way that I teach in my videos, and you're also serious about learning React, you should definitely check out my course Project React, which goes way more in depth than anything that I teach in this video and any other video, and will actually teach you all the missing pieces, all the required pieces to become a React developer, and will walk you through every step of the way. Literally from A to Z, it's all in there. It's a great course. People love it. It takes a very unique approach, and I'm very proud of it as well. So if you're interested, it's called Project React. It'll be linked in the description. I'll see you there. All right, so let's begin. So this is what we're going to be implementing in this video. This is what we call a Kanban board. It's essentially a board of items and different columns, and you can move items in between the columns based on their status, right? If you've worked as a software developer, you're probably pretty familiar with this. So what we can do is we can click on anything and then we can drag it, right? And this is super performant, super smooth. We can then move it here to another column. It automatically snaps into each column. And we can also do the same thing here. We can move it here as well. It is going to snap, and all of these just work automatically. It's super beautiful, performant, fast, and it's honestly a great user experience. And again, the code required for this is super simple. So now let's go into the code and start implementing this. All right, so this is now the code for this, and this is what we have currently so far. So what we have here is we have a columns definition. This is just an array of columns. Each column has an ID property and then a title, and it's pretty simple. We have to do, in progress, and done. And then we have our initial tasks, which essentially serves as our database for this project. We have a list of tasks here. Each one has an ID, a title, a description, and then the status property over here. The status is going to be one of these columns over here. As you can see, the status matches. We have to do and then ID to do here. That's very important because we're going to be using the status to determine in which column we should show any individual task. And then over here at the bottom of the component, we have our tasks state variable here. It gets its initial value as the initial tasks. And this is what we're going to be using and updating as we're dragging things along to update the column that they're actually in. So first, what I want to do is come here to this outer div because this is our container for everything. And I'm just going to add here a class name, and I'm going to do padding and then 4 to kind of give just a little bit of padding across our entire page, if you will. And then inside of here, I'm going to create another div, and this is going to be our wrapper for our individual columns. And this is going to have class name. We're going to do flex, and then we're going to do gap 8 to make a gap in between every single column. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come here and we're going to take our columns and we're just going to map over every single column. So we're going to do map column, and then we're going to do here column. And this is going to return here a function. We're going to do return. And here we need a component, but for now we're just going to return empty. What is the issue here? There we go. That was just some syntax issue. Then here, we're going to need a component to actually return. Now, instead of putting everything in line here, we're going to come here and create another component, and we're going to call this one column like this. So that's going to be column.tsx. So first, because we are working in TypeScript, I'm going to start by creating the types. I'm going to do type column props. Now, if you're not working in TypeScript, that's totally fine. Just ignore this part. It doesn't really affect the core of the video. That's fine. The first prop here is going to be column. And this I'm going to do column. And I'm going to import this from our types over here, which I have in this project. But I'm going to alias this as column type just because our component is going to be called column, and I don't want to have interference with the actual names and the type. So I'm going to do here column type like this. And then we're also going to need an array of tasks for that specific column. So we're going to do tasks like this, and it's going to be task. We're going to import this from our types, and this is going to be an array of tasks. Then we're going to come here and actually define our component. So we're going to do export function column. And this is going to be a function. We're going to have this here column and then tasks like this. That is going to be column props. And here we are going to have to return some actual JSX and some actual functionality in this component. Now I'm just going to take here some markup that I have just because I don't want to type everything and then risk the chance of making a mistake. So we're just going to do return, and I'm just going to return everything and just remove everything that we don't currently have I'm going to leave these as placeholders for later, again, just so that we keep all of the styles correctly. So essentially we have a div here with some styles. We have an h2 with the column title, again, some styles. And then we have a div here, which is going to be the place where we actually render all of our individual tasks. With this, we can now come back here to the app component. We can go here, and then instead of just rendering nothing, we can just do column and then import this from column and then do key column.id and then pass the column like this. So we're going to do column and then we're going to close this. And now we still have an error. We need to pass the actual tasks over here for that specific column. So we're just going to come here and do tasks, and that is going to be equal to tasks dot map, actually filter, sorry. We're going to take each task and we're only going to return the task if their task dot status equals, and then we're going to do column dot title dot id, actually, right? So we're only going to give here the tasks that their status matches the actual ID of the column. This is essentially only going to render the tasks on that specific column. Now, I do want to mention that this is not really the best in terms of performance, because what we've done here is essentially every single time that this component renders, and even worse, for every single column, every single renderer, we're essentially going to be looking through an array and trying to filter. This is obviously unperformant. It's fine for now because we have this as a static list, right? We're not really fetching any data or anything, and we also don't have a lot of tasks, so it's fine. But ideally, in a production application, you wouldn't really do it this way. You would most probably come here to the column component and actually fetch the data, fetch the tasks inside of this component, and only fetch the ones for that specific column, and then you won't have this problem. But again, for this tutorial, this is how we're doing it. Just be mindful that this might not be the best way in terms of performance. And then we can go back here to the column, and now we have our tasks over here. And what we can do is we can do pretty much the same thing. We can come here and do tasks.map, and we can map for each task over here. And for each task, we can just return. And again, we're going to need another component. So we're going to come here and make another component. And this one is going to be our task card. We're going to do task card.tsx like this. And then here again, we're going to start with the type. So we're going to do type task card props. And that is going to be just a task, which is going to be a task like this. We're going to import this from our types. And here we're going to do export function task card. We're going to give here the types, which is going to be task card props. And now I'm just going to, again, take some markup over here, just because it's easier to write than to just do everything by myself and risk making mistakes. So we're going to do return. And here I'm just going to remove all of this here because this will come in handy a little bit later. So we have our task card over here. It just receives a task, and then it just renders the title and the description with some styles over here. Now we can come back here to the column, and here we can just do task card, and we can pass it here key task.id, and then task, we can do task like this, and there we go. So now if I run this, we're going to do pnpm dev. We're going to see that we have some functionality over here. There we go. We have the exact same styles that we had before, but nothing is draggable. I can try to drag stuff and it just doesn't work. Now we're going to have to implement drag and drop functionality into this component. So we're going to go here to dnd-kit. So we're going to do dnd-kit.com, and we're going to get this library over here. I'm just going to copy this command. Now, because I'm using pnpm, I'm just going to put here a p in front of it. That's fine. We're going to install the dnd-kit core. The core part just essentially has the minimal amount of components that you need to actually implement something like this, like a drag and drop, and that's going to be sufficient for us. That's really all that we need. So now that we have it installed, we can still run pnpm dev again just to have this running, and then we can go back here to our app component, and the first step for us to do is to create a function that is going to handle the drop end. So whenever we're going to be dragging something and we're going to be ending that drag, it's actually the drag end, if I believe. Yeah, whenever we're ending the drag, we need a function that is going to get called with all the information, and then we're going to be able to use that to actually update the state in our tasks. So we're going to come here and we're going to do function handle drag end, and that is going to take here an event. So we're going to event, and that is going to be a drag end event, and we're going to import this from dnd-kit/core. This event is going to have some properties over here that we can actually use to determine what to do with our actual tasks or with our actual event. So we're going to do here const, and we're just going to get active and then over from the event. These are properties that come from the event. Active is going to be here this active property, and then over is going to be this over or null property. Now, we're going to see exactly what active and over actually represents in just a moment, but for now, let's just continue and actually implement the function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to make a check for over. We're going to be if is not over, then we're just going to return. And the reason we're doing this is essentially over means if we're not currently over something that is droppable, right? If we're not, then we're just not going to do anything because this doesn't really apply. If we are, however, over something that is droppable, then we're going to continue with the rest of this function. So we're going to do const task ID, and that is going to be equal to active.id, and we're just going to do here as a string like this. This is going to be our actual task ID over here, which we're going to set up later. This ID over here, that is going to be the tasks that we're actually dropping, right? So that's step one. And then we're going to do const new status equals over.id, and that is going to be as task status as well. Now we're actually having to manually typecast these to the correct types because there's no way for this to know what types we're actually dragging over, right? That is a limitation of this. So we have to manually create our typecast ourselves. And this over here, this new status is basically going to be the over.id. And this is actually going to be the column ID that we're going to be dropping over, right? That column ID is going to be here, right? ID to do or in progress or done. And the reason why we're calling this new status is because here in the task over here, that ID of the column is also the status of the tasks, right? So we're just calling this new status because we're going to now be making an update inside of our state with this new ID and with this new status over here. So now we're going to come here and actually make the updates inside of our task state to actually update as a result of this drag. So we're going to do set tasks. We're going to pass here a function. Now we're going to do tasks.map and then task. And here we're going to make a check. If the task.id is equal to the task ID, then we're going to want to do something. So we're going to put a question mark. Otherwise, we're just going to want to return the task as is. And then in here, if the task is equal, we're just going to make an object over here and we're going to return the task that is spread. And we're going to do status equals new status like this. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking all of the tasks and then only in the one that is equal to the one that is currently active, we're going to give it the new status and then just set it in a state and then keep all the other tasks in a state just like we had before. And that's it. That's all the functionality required for our handle drag end function. Again, this is going to get called whenever we're dragging something and we release the mouse to be able to drop it onto something. We're going to get these values and then we're going to set that in the state. We're going to update the state with the new values. Now, for this to work, we actually have to come here and wrap everything inside of a dnd context. So that is going to be dnd context. We're going to import this from dnd-kit core. Then we're going to pass here the function on drag end. We're going to do here handle drag end that is going to connect our function to this dnd context, and then we're going to put our columns inside of here so that they have access to the context and so that everything works exactly as we expect. Then the next step for us to do is now to come here to our column and actually connect this column component to this drag and drop context and actually specify the ID of the column, which is then going to go again inside of this over.id for us to know which column we've dropped our task into. So that's the next step. And for that, we're going to be using a hook from dnd-kit, and that is going to be the use droppable hook. We're going to use droppable because this column is going to be the place where you drop things into. So we're going to do use droppable, and we're going to import this from dnd-kit/core. And here, the only thing that we have to provide is an ID, and this is going to be our column.id. This is now going to connect this component over here, this column, to our actual dnd context using this ID, and it's going to get over here in this over.id for us to be able to use. Now, this is going to return something from us, and we need what it returns. So we're going to do const, and here we're going to destructure it, and we're going to do set node ref, and this is going to be a function that we now apply to the ref of this specific HTML input that we want this droppable functionality to be into. In our case, that is going to be all of this over here, this div here. So we can do ref, and we're going to do set node ref. And there we go. Now we pass this function to this, and now we have officially marked this column over here based on its ID, and it's now connected and will work with drag and drop. Finally, the last thing for us to do is to also do something very similar with each individual task. And here we're going to use another hook that is going to be the use draggable hook, because now we're going to make each of these individual components to be draggable, and so that again, they work with the whole context. So we're going to do here use draggable. and this is a different hook. This is not the droppable hook. This is the draggable hook because we're going to be dragging this. And again, we're going to have to pass it here an ID, which is going to be a task.id as well. And now we've also connected this component to our drag and drop context, and that is going to be this ID over here. This active.id is going to be the active thing that is being dragged. It's being dragged over what? It's being dragged over this over.id. Again, that is full end-to-end, how we can know what is being dragged and what column it's being dragged into. And then this is also going to return to us some values. So we're going to do the same thing, const, give this here an object. And now we're going to do attributes, and we're all going to do listeners. We're going to do set node ref, which is the same function that we had before, and then transform like this. We're going to be using all of these inside of this component over here. So first, let's do the simple stuff. Let's come here and let's add the ref. So we're going to do ref set node ref like this. Then we're also going to spread all the listeners. So we're going to do listeners like this, and then spread as well the attributes. We don't need to worry about any of these props. We just need to spread them. That's really it. That is just going to make all of this work exactly as we expect without us really having to do anything. And then the last thing that we need to do is this transform over here, which is actually going to hold the values, the X and Y coordinates of the thing that is being dragged. And we need to use that to actually update the style of this div over here to actually show it as it's being dragged. Now, because we're using Tailwind over here, there's no real easy way to actually get the X value from here inside of Tailwind, at least not in the way that I know right now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to revert back to the default, to the classics, right? And just create a const style prop like this and just pass the style directly to the HTML element. So we're first going to check transform, if we have a transform, because this can be null, so we can have transform or null. So if we have a transform, we're going to do something. Otherwise, we're just going to do undefined like this and not even worry about it. If we have a transform, then what we're going to do is we're just going to put here transform, and this is going to be a string interpolation, and we're going to do the age-old translate, pass it here a function. Then we're going to do transform.x pixels, comma, and then we're going to do here transform.y pixels like this, and we are going to save. And then we just come here to our component and do style, and then style like this. Now we took this style, we passed it, it has the actual transform of our drag and drop, and everything should theoretically be working as we expect, because now we've completed every single step of the pipeline to get drag and drop to actually work. So let's come here, let's see if we're running. We're actually running, so that's good. Let's come back here to our application. Let's go here to this, and now if I drag and drop, you're going to see that it updates. That is the transform X and Y being updated. And then as soon as I let go, we're going to call on drag end. That is going to say, oh, we are dragging something. It is over an actual column. That is the column ID. So it's going to go and update the state and actually show our task in the correct column. I can do it again. I can drag, I can drop it, and it knows exactly the column, and it works. I can also come here and drop it somewhere that is not in any individual column, and you're going to see that nothing happens. If I go here in between, actually that worked. Why is this working? Yeah, if I go here just above, it's not working. You get the idea. If it's not over anything, then this over.id is not going to represent anything, and so we're just going to return here. We're not going to do anything. That is how this works. We can drag and drop, everything is fine. Now, one more time, just to recap, to really make sure that you understand this correctly, what is happening here is we have this handle drag end function, which will get called every single time that we're dragging something and we let go to actually try to drop it on something. If we're dropping it over something that is valid, we're going to continue with this code. We're going to get the actual ID of the thing that we're dropping on, and we're also going to have the ID of the thing that is being dropped, and we can run our code to actually make those states update in our actual state. If we're not dropping over anything that is valid, this is not going to be there. It is going to return, and we're not going to do anything. And then in the column component, we're connecting it using the use droppable hook, and we're passing it the ID that is then going to be this over.id property over here. So that's how we know which column we're actually in. And again, this column.id comes from the props of our column component, which is simply mapping over these columns, and it's one of these IDs over here, right? So one of these IDs will be the one that we're dropping over. Using the use droppable hook, we're connecting it by the ID. We're getting the set node ref function. We're attaching it to the ref, and everything is going to work. And then for every single task, we're doing the same thing. We're using the use draggable hook. We're passing the same ID, the task ID, as the property. And then we're accessing all of these properties over here. So most of these we're just passing directly to our actual div. And then we're just taking the style, which has the transform. We're just doing this over here and passing the style and connecting it to actually show that it's being dragged. And that's it. That's all the code required to achieve all of this. It's super fast, super performant, super efficient. And the code that we had to write was very little, right? A lot of this code is just creating components and organizing data around. The actual code related to drag and drop is literally just this function over here. Then it is just this hook over here, and then it is just this hook over here, and only spreading all of these properties over here. That is it. That is all that is required to get drag and drop to work. And that's why dnd-kit is a really good library. I highly recommend it. And now you know how to handle drag and drop in React, and you can apply it to any project that you're currently working on. There you go. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Kazan. This is Kazan Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.